This video is going to be about reality for those who have trouble sticking in reality, or even if the concept of reality just kind of makes you cringe, as it used to make me cringe a long time ago. So my name is Alex, and I make videos about intuition and spirituality and following your heart, and all kinds of stuff like that. So if you're into that content at all and any of this is resonating so far, please don't hesitate to subscribe or like or do all that good stuff. But I want to get into it now and share with you some insights and basically a way to think about this word reality, of course, versus its opposite of fantasy and the imagination, in a way that could make things click for you like it did for me. So what we're accustomed to doing, a lot of us who, especially if you're a bit younger, but not necessarily, because there's always ways to escape, is if you think about something like video games, which I used to be semi or fully addicted to for like years. I was in a place for a long time where I would play tons of video games every single day. And I knew I was escaping something, and yet as soon as I thought about the alternative of, like, it felt like a nagging voice almost, like, oh, you should return to reality. Why don't you live in reality? Like, that concept to me was like, no, I don't want to do that. Because this idea of a real versus, a false, the way I was casting that in my mind was the real was basically boring, or the real was dead, or the real was unimaginative. The real connoted things like sitting in a therapist's office, of like, let's just get real about everything, about problems, or reading the news. The real meant having to worry about car payments or mortgages, or getting a job and keeping a job, and dealing with the nasty intricacies of relationships, all that kind of stuff that felt like so much work. Not to say I was necessarily trying to completely obliterate my relationship with, like, the physical world, but the point is, you get sucked into fantasies as ways of dealing with people, as ways of dealing with yourself, pretty much. I mean, you could even say that even if you are going out and socializing or dealing with the vicissitudes of life, you can do so in an escapist fantasy kind of way, where everything becomes living through social media, for example. Everything becomes about like living through the representation of things, or how things look, as opposed to the reality of how things are, or trying to find some way to kind of escape from any little thing that bothers you, for example. And oftentimes you do this without even noticing. So if you really project this forward and think about video games, for example, as like the huge example of the time we're living in, where there's actually more people working in the video game industry, as far as the animators and the designers and the people who, program and code and everything, and who sell the video games to mostly teenage audiences. And well, nowadays it's pretty much all ages, isn't it? All that stuff, essentially, there's more people working in that than in Hollywood, in cinema now, because it's like this next level of immersion. And I used to think all that stuff was really cool. So, as spirituality has increased in my life over the past several years, this put more and more and more pressure on what video games are. And this is a huge topic for me. I'm sure I'm going to be speaking about this and maybe writing about this in the future. Like, what does it mean to have simulated realities versus physical reality? But one thing that finally did it for me is seeing that video game realities are essentially the production of mind, the production of basically some kind of architects or virtual architects who are planning and plotting what a place should look like. And I know this can still sound kind of cool, like, yeah, that's awesome, like we should be using our imaginations to craft realities. But I want to challenge you, if that's the way you're thinking a little bit, and challenge you to engage your heart sensor a little bit and engage your emotions. And let's do an exercise where it projects this forward and projects a reality forward where people spend more time online, more time playing video games, more time on social media, to the point that, we then have an explosion in the so-called Internet of Things. So your light bulbs in your refrigerator and your car, of course, are completely connected to the internet, connected to the Borg, connected to virtual media and telecommunications and all that. And then, of course, you have this thing called the metaverse, which is essentially that to an even bigger degree, where you're hooked up to like a bionic suit, and all the stimuli that you experience in the virtual worlds actually get translated to your physical body, right? You work in the virtual world, you hang out in the virtual world, you know people there, you're just wearing basically some kind of a VR, virtual reality goggles, like all the time. I can't resist saying one little fact about that. If you guys have noticed the explosion in LED lights in the past like 5 to 10 years, especially white LED lights that carry a frequency of the blue LED lights, unlike street lights, street lamps, car headlights, especially like cars and street lights is where it's just huge. Pretty much anytime you're in an urban environment or even a rural environment at nighttime, I mean, you just see these lights everywhere. It's those piercing white lights that like hurt your eyes. You know, there's theories that basically the point of that is in 10, 20, 30 years, there's going to be so much macular degeneration and problems to basically people's ability to see that it's going to force everyone into VR. Because if you can't see in the physical worlds, all of a sudden we have a solution. You don't have to be able to see at a distance. We can just strap VR onto you, or maybe even hook into your optic nerve. Well, whatever. Let's not go down too much that rabbit hole right now. Just to mention that really quickly. And so this is the world we're projecting, where everything's VR. Everything's so-called virtual. It's kind of a funny word, virtual, because it doesn't have much to do with being virtuous. I have to check on that etymology, right? Virtual. But everything becomes like that. And so you imagine that, and even imagine it in the most favorable possible light, where you're living in some virtual reality. But no, it's really cool. And it's designed by people who actually have these amazing imaginations. And they're making these gorgeous worlds and these simulated realities where everything is neat and orderly. And you have missions to complete. And you have, weapons that you can wield, but it's not real because you're not hurting anyone or killing anyone, because it's all virtual. So it's okay. And it's really cool that we get to have these excursions and these games, and we get to work. But maybe society is so efficient, whatever that word even means anymore, that in this metaverse, people work like 3 hours a week because there's just hardly any need for people to produce anything, because we're all hooked up to this fake reality. So we get to spend pretty much all our time having fun in this place, whatever it is that all these reasons why you can think this is a cool thing and why you'd want to live over there in some like some architect of the mind's creation, what they have produced for you, or even what you produce for yourself. Think about the world around us, and think about this world basically rotting away as nobody hangs out here, as nobody needs to go for walks anymore. Nobody needs to spend time in the physical environment. Because this was the 3D dark physical world where you have to worry about, how many hours of daylight there are every day, or when do you plant your crops, and how do you harvest them, and worrying about what is it like to interact with someone face to face, where you don't have an avatar to hide behind, where you have to worry about, the elements, how they affect you, and the rain and the snow and the temperature outside, and all these aspects of our, physical reality. And what would happen to this place as everyone just pulls their attention and their focus out of it? And, who knows what kind of a AI, artificial intelligence dictatorship we'd be living under. I mean, what would happen to this world? How would it be treated? Would it just be ignored, or would it be destroyed as we no longer need these things and we found some ultra efficient way to produce all the resources we need to keep our physical bodies going as we recede more and more into the virtual world? And all this stuff with its nastiness of like waking up early in the morning and how cold the weather feels, and needing to talk to people in a face-to-face basis where there's nowhere to hide, no way to hide your emotions or your nervous systems, and everything is so raw. And you have, of course, the animal world and insects. And oh, no one likes insects and spiders and mosquitoes. So let's just go to a virtual world where we don't have to deal with that, you know. I mean, no one wants to deal with the prospect of a bear charging at you. You can just have a virtual bear and virtual bear cubs in this game, which gives you everything that people liked about bears or about wildlife, right? None of the nasty things like getting mud on your boots. My boots aren't even very muddy right now. But maybe what you're starting to feel is a compassion for this physicality, which is such a funny thing to think about, but an in-tuneness with the rawness of the natural world that we've been given, this place that we have. And then maybe, depending on your spirituality or where you go with this, maybe you start to feel and remember that this entire place is a projection field. I mean, people, for example, in Course of Miracles, like to say all the time how this world is fake and it's not of God. And other people of other philosophies and other religions tend to, you know, may have similar views that this place isn't real. This place is just a phenomenal world. This isn't the true kingdom. This isn't really what God has created. But I would challenge you on that and push back and just say, anytime you want to abandon this world and pull away from this world and say it doesn't matter, all we're dealing with is a projection outwardly of who we are inwardly. And yet what we have to work with is a projection outwardly of who we are inwardly, which is absolutely amazing when you think about it at the same time, because all this moss and these ferns and these massive trees that are probably not even first generation forests, because that was probably deforested for logging 100 to maybe 150 years ago here in Western Washington, USA. All this land, this entire place that we have, we can still do with it whatever we want. And so do you want to sit there plugging yourself into some kind of a virtual reality where any sign of suffering and pain gets somehow obliterated within the field and scope of your consciousness because you just need a delete key? You know, all you need is a delete key and you can just wipe away pain, wipe away discomfort, wipe away mosquitoes and mud on your boots, and getting up early and having to yell at people and set boundaries and all that crap, right? I mean, do you want to be the one who says, let's just forget the plants and the animals and the rawness? Do you want to leave this place behind because you couldn't face up to what it all means and the opportunity that it gives you? And so that's the question I have for you today. And that's how I think you could maybe approach it. Thinking about these worlds that we're building for each other, for ourselves more and more, that are just extensions of pure, unadulterated mind. Just thinking and thoughts and fluff and fantasy, right? And it's very, very sobering because you can get absolutely sucked into this way of thinking. Sneak peek, all this thinking is a reaction to trauma. At the first, at the last, always. All these times, and you will live in them for years and years as I did, and thinking that all that really matters is your ability to imagine yourself into different phenomenologies, be that, you know, fantasy books or fantasy movies or video games or full-blown virtual reality. You will think that you're justified and that that's all you got, but I'm telling you that all that is just coming from pain. And the sooner you can learn to appreciate what we have here, the sooner you can turn away from that destructive ideology and start to consider that a love in your heart would ask you to participate here more fully and to understand what we have. So if this made any sense to you or you felt it on some level, I ask you to just sit with that and see where it takes you. And of course, if you want to hear more of my thoughts that can perhaps catalyze something for you, you can subscribe and you can tune in and just keep on going. All right. God bless.